Trump threatens to invoke Insurrection Act to quell protests in Minneapolis. In a stark escalation of federal response to ongoing protests in Minneapolis, U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to invoke the rarely used Insurrection Act, a 19th century law that would allow him to deploy military forces domestically to suppress unrest connected to clashes between local residents and federal immigration agents. Tensions in Minnesota have surged over the past week following a series of confrontations between locals and officers from a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement (ICE) agency. The protest started after an ICE agent fatally shot Renee Good, a Minneapolis woman participating in an ICE Watch protest aimed at documenting federal immigration operations. A subsequent incident saw another man shot in the leg by a federal officer during a struggle, further intensifying anger and mobilizing demonstrators. Across several days of demonstrations, crowds have gathered near federal facilities, leading to clashes, arrests, the deployment of tear gas, and repeated calls for de-escalation from local leaders. On Thursday, President Trump used the social media platform Truth Social to warn that he would institute the Insurrection Act if Minnesota politicians did not act to end what he described as attacks on federal agents, whom he referred to as patriots of ICE. Trump framed the unrest as tantamount to an insurrection that, in his view, justifies extraordinary federal intervention. The Insurrection Act, enacted in 1807, grants the U.S. President authority to deploy active-duty military forces or federalize the National Guard to restore order in cases of rebellion, civil disorder, or where law enforcement is unable to maintain public safety. Historically, it has been used more than 24 times, most recently in 1992 during the Los Angeles riots, but it is seldom invoked in modern domestic affairs. Minnesota's Democratic governor, Tim Walz, and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey have denounced the idea of invoking the Insurrection Act, warning that military deployment could inflame tensions and further undermine public trust. They, along with local civil rights groups and protest organizers, have urged peaceful protest and call for accountability regarding federal agent conduct. Civil liberties advocates and legal experts are also raising constitutional concerns, arguing that using the Insurrection Act in this context, especially against largely civilian protests, risks overreach and sets concerning precedent for federal involvement in local civil unrest. The unfolding situation in Minneapolis underscores growing national division over immigration enforcement and the limits of federal power. Trump's administration has significantly expanded immigration crackdowns and deployed large numbers of federal agents to cities with Democratic leadership, sparking controversy, legal challenges, and vigorous public debate. As crowds continue to protest and legal challenges mount, the implications of invoking the Insurrection Act, and whether Trump will follow through on his threat, remain central questions in the evolving conflict between federal authority and local governance, the protection of civil liberties, and the right to peaceful protest.